Hi, Nigel. A wise person once told me that it's only sensible to lie if you're clever enough to maintain the lie. And guess what? You're not. Let me explain. It's been 27 days since the 5 grooming gang survivors who you misrepresented in your press conference demanded an apology for you. 27 days where the press have just forgotten about it, even though the press keep telling us that they really care about the grooming gang survivors and they want justice for them. They wanted justice for them because of people in authority lying about them. People like you that have failed to take accountability for their lies and correct the record. Or let's look at the evidence that 20 of your school friends have stepped forward to say that at school, that'll be the posh Dulwich College school that your parents paid for you to go to, you were a bully and a racist. And I guess even more disturbingly, seemingly a bit of an Adolf Hitler fanboy. When this first came up in 2013, you admitted it. You said, of course I said ridiculous things that upset them. You said it wasn't necessarily racist, it depends how you define racism. I mean, all the rest of us seem to define it in the same way, Nigel, so it's just you that seems to have an issue with it. When it came up again in 2019, you begrudged the fact that it had risen again. You said we're going over old ground, but then this time you added this. You said with the rise of Thatcherism and stuff, lots of people were attracted to more extreme views on politics. I mean, I wasn't, but seemingly you're thinking that's a normal thing. By 2021, your story had changed again. By this point, you were just winding up the left-wing teachers that were at the college. Then fast forward to 2025, where the people in question are now happy to put their name to the quotes that they'd previously given anonymously. But by this time, your barrister was saying it was wholly untrue. But in 2013, it was true. And in 2019, it was okay at the time to experiment with extremism. But some 6 years later, you're categorically denying the stuff that you admitted to previously. Your barrister then writes to The Guardian again, this time threatening to sue them if they print anything else. At this point, you're claiming that the 20 witnesses are not credible. So The Guardian point out to your barrister that actually your story has changed, at which point your barrister's response is to now say it's defamatory and malicious. Of course, it's not defamatory because you'd already admitted to saying this stuff. And then you move on to the Trump tactic of, well, it must be fake news. The Guardian has made it up. There's no corroborating evidence to support what the 20 people have said to them. And your spokesperson now claims that they're just trying to smear you because Reform are doing so well in the polls. Which incidentally is interesting because you've actually gone down in the polls a bit this week. But anyway, I digress. When Starmer brings it up in PMQs, your spokesperson says something well weird. They said if this story was true, why hadn't it come up earlier? But it had in 2013 when you admitted it. And then yesterday, when a journalist asked you personally, had you said all these racist comments, you said you'd never been racist with intent. So you're trying to make out you're the accidental racist. In fact, you're beginning to buckle under the most basic of questions if, as you claim, you're telling the truth. And if, as you claim you're telling the truth, why are you always threatening to sue the newspapers? The same barrister who threatened to sue The Guardian for defamation, even though they hadn't defamed you because you'd already said that you'd said the racist stuff, the same barrister then tried to sue Nation Cymru, a Welsh newspaper, who, quite rightly, asked some questions around the fact that your Senedd member had been suspended, noting that your head of communications had also been in the WhatsApp group that had been saying the racial slurs. In fact, you have quite a record of threatening legal action to local news organisations that dare to put you under scrutiny. But you've been lying quite a lot recently. Let's take Clacton, for example. Somebody has to because you're not looking after it. You said that you couldn't run surgeries, MP surgeries in Clacton, because it wasn't safe for you to do so. The Speaker's office had said that. But then the Speaker's office said they hadn't said that. And you went, well, the Speaker's office is right. Like, hello? And then you said that you'd bought a house in Clacton. But it transpired that you hadn't. Your partner had. Your partner, who didn't have very much money, who suddenly came over with £885,000 to buy a very posh house in Frinton-on-Sea. Or there's that time you said you'd never met the Russian ambassador. until somebody showed you the photo of you meeting the Russian ambassador and you went, oh yes, that was it. And let's not forget, when the story first broke about Nathan Gill, the official line from Zia Yusuf was that nobody in Reform knew Nathan. And when he was shown a picture of you and Nathan together back in the day, Zia said, you just get your picture taken with anybody. It doesn't mean anything. But we now know he's one of your oldest and most loyal friends. We also know, according to the police report, that further investigations are needed because there are other pro-Brexit MEPs that are in the frame for taking money off Putin. But even though your party is right in the middle of a treasonous scandal, you're refusing to investigate. Now, I appreciate it's tricky because you yourself were saying the same things as Nathan Gill was being paid to say, the pro-Putin propaganda stuff over in Brussels. But then, even more reason for you to investigate, I would have thought. But yesterday, you said you couldn't investigate because you don't have a police force. You said you can't access people's phone messages or emails, so, what's the point? Although my favourite part was this. You said on the record, well, I've asked everybody, have you taken any money you shouldn't from anybody? And no one said yes. The thing is, Nigel, right? You think you're going to be the next Prime Minister, and that is your idea of security. I asked them, they all said no. Job done, investigation over. Seemingly, you're the only one not bothered about Reform and the Russian connection. Because up in Scotland, they're literally asking Reform in Scotland not to take Russian money. Saying that, Nigel, given the mess that your councillors are making down in Kent, they could probably do with some Russian money to get them out of the hole that they've dug themselves into. Anyway, good chats, as you were.